The red of the sunset bled through the windows of the Red Keep like a wound that wouldn't close. Ravens flew in silence above the battlements, and the hush that fell over King's Landing wasn't from peace. It was fear. No one had seen the new king's face in days, and even fewer knew his name. Some called him Rhaegar returned. Others whispered he was a demon wearing a dead man's skin. But only a handful, in dark corners of the world, knew the truth. Jaqen Hagar now ruled Westeros. He wasn't supposed to. He never wanted to. Or maybe he did. No one could tell. A man with no face could wear all of them. It started with a single death. Lord Varys, poisoned, they said. But his tongue had been removed first surgically, precisely, no blood. Just gone. Then came Grandmaster Qyburn, vanished, left his robes and a trail behind. The rookery tower like a snake shedding skin. The power players fell one by one, never with blood or banners, never with screens or steel. Just absence, emptiness. The small council had grown small indeed. Then, when the sun rose on the third day, the guards at the Iron Throne found a body seated there still warm. King Aegon Vi, Jon Snow, his throat cut, eyes open, as if he never saw it coming. Because he didn't. His killer had walked into his chambers wearing Arya Stark's face. But Arya was long gone, sailing west, chasing winds and legends. And Jaqen had learned well, or perhaps it was the other way around. There was no coronation, no royal announcement, no screaming mobs, just silence, and a man in a simple gray robe sitting where dragons once perched. He didn't need a crown. He was the crown now. Who are you? Sir Davos asked the first time he was called before the throne. A man is who he must be, came the answer, voice flat, ancient, and tired. A king, if needed. But why? Why sit there? Davos asked. Because the game was never about thrones. It was always about names. And now there is none. He didn't speak again for weeks. He issued commands in whispers. Sometimes via children who seemed to know things they shouldn't. Sometimes by ravens who carried only one word, scrawled in perfect Braavosi lettering. Every noble who questioned. Him House Tarly, House Royce, even what was left of the Lannisters, either disappeared or bowed. The Vale sent ravens. They got none in return. The North tried to rise again under Sansa Stark. She was found dead in her bed, but it wasn't her face. It was Arya's. Except Arya was still across the narrow sea, wasn't she? And in the shadows, whispers grew louder. The faith had no answer. The Red Priests claimed the many-faced god now ruled all. And they weren't entirely wrong. Westeros had bled for centuries over names, banners, bloodlines, dragons. Jaqen offered something different. No promises. No politics, just endings. In Flea Bottom, people said, better ruled by death than by liars. In the Reach, they prayed to old gods and knew to be spared. But no one knew what the new king wanted. And that was the worst part. He never left the throne room. Not to eat, not to sleep. Just sat, watching. Always watching. Some guards swore he changed faces when they blinked. Others quit, terrified of what they saw at night. One swore she heard him whisper her mother's name in her mother's voice. Meanwhile, the realm grew still, peaceful in a way. Thieves stopped stealing. Lords stopped plotting. Because no one wanted to draw attention. Death, after all, had become king. At first, the people thought it was peace. Roads once filled with corpses and broken wagons now ran smooth and quiet. No more wildfire, no more dragon fire, no armies clashing in the fields, no lords shouting in halls about honor or blood. Just silence, the kind that wrapped around your chest like a rope and pulled slowly. But peace with Jaqen Hagar was not peace at all. It was stillness. Fear pretending to be calm. In the north, the snows fell early that year. Winter had not only come it had made itself at home. The ravens from King's Landing arrived rarely, but when they did, they carried orders no man could ignore. Send your master to the wall, one read. Do not look for him after. Another, earn the crypts at Winterfell. No. Lady Brienne refused that last one. She lasted 3 days before the face of Podrick appeared in her tent, smiling. But when she leaned in to scold him, he opened his mouth and whispered, "A girl had a name. Now a woman has none." She reached for her sword, but she was already bleeding before it left the scabbard. Her body was found in a pool of snow in silence. Podrick was gone. And yet, hadn't he died years ago at the Battle of King's Landing? That was the thing about the faceless king. He didn't need armies. He was an army. Of everyone. He sent no soldiers to Dorne, but the prince was found impaled on a spear carved with Braavosi script. He sent no message to the Iron Islands, yet their fleet returned in ruins without a single sailor left. Just ships adrift, and the smell of strange oils and burned flesh. The only one who dared speak aloud anymore was Tyrion Lannister, now kept in the Tower of the Hand, not as Hand of the King, but as a relic, a reminder of the old game. He doesn't rule, Tyrion muttered to himself. He erases. And the more he does, the more we forget the world before him. He tried to escape once, dug through stone with a spoon. It didn't matter. The next morning, the walls were sealed again, and his hand? It was no longer his. Jaqen had taken it, wore it for a day as a trophy. Even Arya, somewhere across the western seas, felt it. The wind whispered her old teacher's name. Jaqen. Jaqen. Kung. No one. She had trained under him, learned to kill under him. But this was no god's justice. This was something else. She turned her ship back east. Back in King's Landing, Jaqen still sat on the Iron Throne, face hidden beneath a hood. Only his hands showed until they changed too. Sometimes a woman's, sometimes a boy's, sometimes dark skin, sometimes pale. But always still, always watching. The lords tried to meet in secret once. Lord Glover, Lady Harlaw, seer Gendry those. Few who still had courage or foolishness. They spoke of rebellion, of finding Dany's last dragon, of crowning another Stark. But when they lifted their goblets that night, every wine cup was filled with seawater, and from each cup a voice echoed. A name was spoken. That is enough. They choked one by one, every single one, except Gendry. He woke the next morning in the Red Keep, wearing a black robe, silent. He now sat beside the throne. The court had changed, and yet never gathered, all ruled by silence and memory. A man in chains played music without strings. A girl with sewn lips painted faces no one recognized. A child sharpened blades that no one ever used, and above them all Jaqen, not sleeping, not smiling, not speaking. Some say he was looking for something. Others say he had already found it, and that was the problem. But deep below the Red Keep, past the dragon skulls and dust, something stirred, forgotten for centuries. Something that even Jaqen could not control. The many-faced god had taken Westeros, but the old gods had not gone quietly, and they were waking. Beneath the Red Keep, deeper than even Maegor the Cruel dared to dig, the stones whispered, not in words, but in feelings, cold, ancient, and angry. No torch could stay lit for long, and no rat or spider dared scurry past the skulls of dragons. The air smelled like wet ash, and something older than death. And down there, bound by iron too old to melt, lay the crypt that no king had touched since the days of Valyria. Jaqen Gar visited often. He moved through the darkness like a shadow already dead. His feet made no sound. His breathing never rose. He didn't need light to see. The faces of the dead spoke to him in the stillness. They whispered of things forgotten, of powers that once ruled before men called themselves kings. He knelt before the sealed door, pressing a hand against its black surface. Bravosi runes were etched into the metal, but older glyphs ran beneath them, symbols from a language never taught, symbols that twitched when touched. Inside, something pulsed. The voice of the many-faced god was not loud. It didn't demand. It reminded. And the reminder was always the same. Even death can forget itself. Open the door and remind it. Jaqen hesitated. That was rare. He had no hesitation when he slit Arya's throat, when he poisoned the Dothraki blood riders, when he had a baby switched at birth in the Eyrie, just to watch how it would change the bloodline. But this was a deeper kind of death. Above, Westeros had begun to unravel beneath the silence. Not with war, but with rot. Crops died early. Animals miscarried. Children were born with glassy eyes and no voices. Mothers whispered prayers in High Valyrian, not to the Seven, but to the stranger. Ravens arrived with blank scrolls. The sun seemed tired, and snow fell in the riverlands, even though it was midsummer. Those still loyal to the idea of the old world Tyrion, Samwell Tarly, Davos gathered in secret beneath the ruins of Old Town. The citadel was ash now, burned years ago in Daenerys' final madness. But the underground libraries had survived, sealed by men who feared what they had written. Samwell read aloud one night. His voice cracked, not from fear, but from knowing. Too much. There was once a face even the faceless men feared, he said, holding a tattered scroll. It wasn't born. It was sealed, locked away. They called it the first death, the root of the god they now serve. Davos shook his head. So he served something darker than death? Tyrion took a long drink. No, he became it. They all knew what that meant. Jaqen wasn't just ruling Westeros. He was preparing it for something worse. Something beyond kings, beyond gods. And still, no armies marched. Fear did the work for him. In Dorne, the desert turned black. Sandstorms came with voices that sounded like dead children. In the north, the weirwoods bled. Bran the Broken, missing for months, was found half buried in snow beneath the heart tree. His eyes had been carved out, but not by blade. The tree had taken them. In the east, the Red Priests began to speak of a final fire, one that even Rhae Lolar feared. And the High Sparrow, thought long dead, was seen walking barefoot through the ruins of the sept face burned off, eyes glowing faintly. And in all this madness, one ship came closer each day. A gray vessel, with sails stitched in the shape of a wolf. Arya was returning. She no longer looked like a girl. She no longer looked like anyone. She had removed her faces. All of them, she was no one, just as Jaqen taught her. But she remembered. And what she remembered most was this. Jaqen Hagar had broken the code of death. He had sat on it, used it, ruled with it. He had made himself king. And now she would make herself his ending aid. Arya Stark stood at the bow of her ship as it sliced through the black waves like a blade through flesh. Her eyes stripped of innocence, mercy, and time watched the outline of Westeros grow larger on the horizon. She wore no sigils. Her cloak was colorless, her blade quiet. The few crewmen aboard didn't ask questions. They feared her more than they feared the storms, because something in her had died. Maybe everything. She hadn't returned for revenge. That word was too soft, too mortal. She came to unmake something someone that should never have existed. The closer she got, the more unnatural the air became. Ravens flew in circles, confused. The moon never rose the same way twice. People walked the shores with hollow eyes and broken speech, muttering prayers to names that didn't belong to gods. Her old home had become something else. And Jaqen, Hagar had done it, quietly, without banners, without war. Just as he taught her, King's Landing was unrecognizable. The sky above it burned in unnatural hues. The towers of the Red Keep twisted slightly, as if something underneath was shifting the very stones. The streets were empty, not deserted empty, as if lives had been erased, not ended. She walked through the city in silence, past doors that opened without hands, past faces that watched her from cracks in stone. None spoke. None stopped her. They knew who she was. Or maybe he did. And he was waiting. Deep in the throne room, Jaqen still sat. But he looked different now. His face shifted between dozens of masks, sometimes within the same breath. His eyes had become bottomless, a reflection of the crypt door below the Red Keep. His fingers drummed on the Iron Throne, not out of boredom, but like a ticking clock. He spoke the moment she stepped onto the stone floor. "A girl returns," he said without looking at her. "But she does not bring a name." Arya stopped. "No, I bring the end of yours." A low chuckle. "Many have tried. None have succeeded. Death is not undone, little wolf." "You are not death," she said, drawing needle. "You're a thief who wears its face." He stood now, slow, fluid, unnatural. "And you are a girl who pretends she still matters." She lunged. Needle moved faster than air, piercing the space where his heart should be. But it struck nothing. His form rippled, and suddenly she was fighting her own reflection. Then Gendry, then Jon, then Siriophoril, all his faces, all his masks, each swung with precision, each taunting her memory and breaking her grip on rage. She dropped needle and reached instead for her truth. Silence, no emotion, no past. They clashed with bare hands, now teacher and student, killer and apprentice. He moved like smoke. She moved like wind. They left no echo, no sound, just the scraping of boots and breathless strikes. And still, he smiled. "You think you kill a god with will alone?" He hissed, pressing her against the stone wall. "I think I kill a man pretending to be one." She spat, driving her knee into his side. He staggered. That was the first crack. He wasn't immortal, just unreadable. Arya pulled from her cloak a small pouch the kind she once used in Bravos. The black dust inside wasn't poison. It was ash from the House of Black and White, sacred dust from the vaults of forgotten faces. She blew it in his eyes, and Jaqen screamed. His skin twisted. Faces peeled off. Dozens, hundreds, maybe more. They hit the ground like broken masks, each one a soul he had stolen. His body convulsed. His eyes bled. Arya took one step back as he collapsed. A whisper echoed from deep below them. "No one ... is not meant to rule." And she answered it, cold and calm. "Then no one rules now?" She took needle and slashed the final mask from his face. And there he was, just a man, older than he looked, tired, hollow. He smiled not wickedly, almost relieved. A girl, truly learned. Then he died. And somewhere beneath the Red Keep, the door he had kept shut for so long, pulsed once more, now unguarded. The sky above King's Landing cracked like old glass. The clouds churned not with rain, but with ash, as if the world sensed what had happened, that the king who wore death's mask was gone, and in his place, nothing. No claimants, no council, no banners, Just the body of a man who was once many, lying at the base of the Iron Throne. Arya stood over him, heart silent. It didn't feel like victory. It felt unfinished. Because the throne still stood. The walls still trembled, and below, something waited. She moved through the Red Keep like a ghost, retracing Jaqen's invisible steps. The corridors were colder now, as if winter had taken root beneath the stone. The air thickened with each step downward, like wading into deep water. Her breath fogged, even though she was far from snow. When she reached the sealed door beneath the old vaults, she understood what Jaqen had been guarding. It was not power. It was containment. The door was pulsing softly now, like a slumbering beast stirring in a dream. It looked like iron but shimmered like black glass. The Braavosi runes on its surface had faded. The older glyphs twisting, primal things now glowed faintly, as if sensing her presence. A memory returned to Arya, a voice in Braavos years ago. There are faces. Even the many-faced god has turned from. Not out of mercy, but fear. Jaqen had not ruled Westeros to conquer it. He had ruled it to prepare it for this. She placed her palm on the door. Cold, painful, her blood responded. Her veins pulsed in rhythm with the strange beats behind. The metal, it was alive. Then, without a sound, it opened. What lay beyond wasn't a room. It wasn't a crypt. It was a void. A cavern so dark and vast, it felt like the inside of a dying god. The floor was smooth obsidian, but soft beneath. Her boots like walking on skin. And in the center stood a stone basin filled with black water. In it, countless faces floated, not carved, not worn-grown. They blinked, breathed, smiled. Arya's legs locked. Her mind screamed at her to turn back. But she stepped forward, drawn like a moth toward flame. The faces began to whisper. Not in tongues, in memories. Her father's voice. When the snows fall and the white winds blow. Her mother's scream on the red wedding night. Syrio Forel laughing, sword dancing. Gendry whispering her name in the dark. Jon. Each voice peeled her like fruit, memory. By memory, the basin wanted her, not her blood, her face. A gift. That was what Jaqen used to call death. A gift for the god. She reached into the basin, fingertips brushing the black water. It was warm, inviting. But Arya Stark had died long ago. The girl who knelt now wasn't here to give. She was here to take. She yanked a face from the basin. A child's face. It screamed once high, sharp, painful, and turned to dust. Then another. An old man's. A faceless god's priest. Dust. And the more she took, the louder the chamber screamed. Until finally, at the bottom of the basin, lay a face that looked back at her. Her own. Younger, freer, wild-eyed, the girl who left Winterfell with a sword and a list. Arya stared at it. Tears slid down her face, not of sadness, of recognition. And then, without flinching, she dropped her current face into the basin and pressed the old one onto her skin. The room went still. Something sighed and the dark pleased, or mourning. And above her, the Red Keep shook. Arya walked out of the chamber as the door sealed itself again. Her steps no longer made sound. Her breath no longer fogged. The girl who emerged into the crumbling halls of the keep wore no crown. She was no queen. But the many-faced god had. A new face now. And she would decide who deserved to wear theirs. By dawn, the Iron Throne had rusted. No one had touched it. No fire had melted it. But it stood there, twisted and useless, as if it finally realized it had served the wrong masters. For too long. The swords that once made up its jagged back sagged, drooping like dying flowers. The hall around it, once echoing with war and ambition, now stood empty, except for her. Arya Stark, or what remained of her, sat silently at the top of the steps, leading to the throne. Not on it. She didn't want it. That was never her goal. She had never chased power. She had chased justice, and then vengeance. And now, something harder to name. The city below had begun to whisper again. Not the same way as before, when people whispered in fear of Jaqen, when children vanished and nobles stayed awake with knives under pillows. No, these whispers were full of wonder, of dread, of confusion. They whispered of a girl who walked barefoot through the blood-stained halls. A girl who looked like Arya Stark, but whose shadow moved like it had a mind of its own. They said the Red Keep bowed when she passed, that the ravens flew in reverse no, that time itself paused when she blinked. And yet, she spoke to no one. Not yet. She listened. She walked the streets, unnoticed except by those who remembered. She saw the people, the broken ones, the hungry ones, the tired ones. She stood by the market as a boy stole a rotten apple and waited for a punishment that never came. She saw the girl who used to sell prayers for copper coins, now drawing faces in the dirt with bloodied fingers. The world had been ruled by wolves, lions, dragons, and then by death. Now it stood at a crossroads, and Arya could feel it deep in her bones. Above all, she felt one truth. Westeros had no soul left, not a real one. The war, the madness, the fire, the ice, the betrayals, it had scorched something out of the realm. The people no longer believed in heroes, or gods, or thrones. They believed in silence. They obeyed it, worshipped it. She couldn't fix that, but maybe she could replace it. She returned to the Tower of the Hand. Tyrion still lived, gaunt, shaking, talking to himself. When she stepped into his cell, he looked up and wept. "You killed him," he whispered. "Didn't you?" She nodded once. "Good, good. And now?" "What? Are you here to end me too?" She stepped closer and knelt. "No," she said, her voice low and aged by what she'd seen. "I'm here to ask something." He chuckled bitterly. "Well, I'm not much help. I'm old, drunk, and waiting to die." "I need names," she said. His breath hitched. "Whose?" "The ones still hiding. The ones who fed Jaqen. The ones who whispered to the faceless king behind closed doors." "I know he didn't do it alone." Tyrion leaned back. "You mean the men who sold Westeros to silence? Lords of coin, old mesters, the guild masters of Bravos, maybe even those twisted souls in old Valyria. You want to clean the bones, not just scrape the skin." She said nothing. Tyrion gave a broken smile. "I'll give you the names, girl. But promise me this, don't become him." "I won't," she said. "I'll become worse, if I must. But I'll do it with a face that's mine." When she stood again, the shadows in the cell seemed to move with her. Tyrion pressed his, forehead against the wall, whispering names long buried. And Arya Stark, last of the North, first of the forgotten, walked away, carrying a new list, not out of hate, out of duty, because someone had to remind the world what fear was supposed to feel like. Not chaos, not slaughter, just the quiet, certainty that the dead remember, and that the faceless girl now walked in the daylight. The list was longer than she expected. Names that hadn't been spoken in years. Lords long thought dead, but alive under false banners and newer faces. Bankers from Bravos who lent gold not for profit, but for control. A high-ranking mester, still pulling strings from a hidden rookery deep in the ruins of Harrenhal. Even whispers of a child taken from Dragonstone during the final siege, raised in shadow, by priests who believed in something darker than any god Westeros had ever known. Tyrion gave her every name with trembling lips and closed eyes. He didn't ask where she was going, he didn't need to. When she left his cell, he cried for the world, not out of guilt, but because he knew what came next would leave no one untouched. Arya moved like a sickness across the realm. Not with fire, not with steel, with precision. In the Reach, Lord Merrill Florent woke to find every servant in his keep wearing the same faces. They stood around his bed, smiling gently. By morning, no one remembered he existed. In the Vale, a young scribe delivered a scroll to Lord Yon Royce. The seal was broken. The parchment was blank, and as he read it, blood poured from his nose. His last word was a name not even he remembered speaking aloud. In Braavos, the Iron Bank closed its doors for the first time in history. The vaults were sealed shut, but inside them faces. Hundreds, pinned like butterflies in glass cases, screaming silently. The gold was untouched. Arya never left a mark. Never a message. Just absence. And still, the throne sat empty. The lords paramount began to gather in Storm's End to discuss the matter. They spoke in circles, cowards with crowns. "We need order," Lord Manderley said. "We need a name," said Lord Dane. "We need a king," said a woman no one recognized. She wore no sigil. Her voice was soft, northern. She offered no proof of birthright, no army, no gold. Only a list. When she read the names aloud, they listened. When she stared into their eyes, they obeyed. They didn't ask who she was, because deep down they knew. She didn't want the throne. She was deciding who wouldn't get it. In Winterfell, the weirwood trees bent toward her. The last Stark had returned, but she didn't kneel. She stood beneath the heart tree, eyes closed, listening not to the old gods, but to the silence. They had always guarded. In the Riverlands, the water turned black for 3 days. The Tullys blamed the gods. The small folk whispered it was because a girl had passed through. She spoke to no one, but by nightfall, the Frey stronghold had crumbled into itself like wet paper. And in Old Town, deep beneath the shattered towers of the citadel, Arya found the last name on her list. He was old, blind, and smiling. "I've been waiting for you," the last Grandmaster said. "I know," she replied. "You think killing me ends it?" "No," she said, "but it ends you." And then he was gone. No blood, no scream. Just gone. The ravens refused to fly for 3 days after. The world began to shift again. Not from war, not from conquest, but from remembering. Remembering that the game had rules once. That justice wasn't always fair, but it was final. That names had weight. And that silence could speak louder than war. And in the center of it all stood Arya Stark. She never wore a crown. She never claimed a keep. She didn't want songs or statues. But when people whispered now, they didn't speak of kings or queens. They didn't even say her name. They simply said, "She walks." And for many, that was enough to confess. Because in a realm ruled by shadows for too long, the last, light came not from fire, but from a blade wrapped in memory. It began and ended in Winterfell. The wind howled over the broken battlements, like a wolf mourning its pack. Snow drifted through the open halls where once feasts and fires roared. The Starks were gone, buried, burned, scattered. Only their stories remained, and even those had been twisted by time, politics, and lies. But now, beneath the weirwood tree, stood the last of them. Arya Stark, though she no longer claimed the name. Names had brought nothing but blood. She had shed hers like a skin, but here, under the bleeding red leaves, she allowed herself one final moment of memory. She sat cross-legged before the old gods, needle beside her, the faces she had collected laid out in a circle like fallen leaves. Not trophies, not tokens, just truths. The men and women she had ended, kings, killers, monsters who wore noble titles and saintly masks. She didn't mourn them. She honored their end. Not for who they were, but for what they no longer were. Threats. The land was quiet now. Too quiet. Her work was done. But silence, like power, is never permanent. As she meditated, a shadow approached across the snow. Light footsteps, careful breaths. A child. No older than she had been when she left King's Landing for the first time. The girl wore a tattered dress and no shoes. Her hands were cracked with cold, but her eyes held something Arya hadn't seen in years' wonder. "Are you her?" the girl asked. Arya opened her eyes slowly. "Who?" The girl pointed at the circle of faces. "The one who walks. The one who ended the faceless king." Arya didn't answer. The girl sat beside her, shivering but brave. "They say you killed gods." "No," Arya said softly. "I killed men pretending to be them." The child looked up. "Why?" Arya looked at the weirwood branches above her. "Because someone had to." Silence passed between them like a torch in the dark. The girl reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, carved figure crudely made, a wolf with a broken leg. "My brother carved it, said it was me." She hesitated. "He died in the Riverlands. A lord's men took everything. Then the lord disappeared. People say you did it." Arya looked at the carving. "Maybe I did." The girl pushed it into Arya's hand. "Then, thank you." Arya froze. It had been years since someone thanked her. The girl stood and stepped back into the snow. "They say the throne's gone now, that no one rules." Arya nodded. "Good. Then who decides what's right?" Arya's voice was colder than the snow around her. "Everyone. Or no one." The girl disappeared into the trees, leaving only her footsteps and the gift behind. Arya stared at the carving. It was ugly. Crooked, flawed, real. She stood slowly, took one last look at the tree, at Needle, at the faces. Then she buried them. All. She buried the blade, the masks, the story. The world didn't need another Stark, another ghost, another reminder of what it had lost. It needed space to become something new. And so Arya walked once more this time, not toward revenge, not toward duty, but toward freedom. She headed west, where no map reached, beyond the crumbling kingdoms and their endless games, beyond the reach of gods, thrones, and whispers. And, though her name faded into myth, fear never did, because the world remembered one thing: not all kings wear crowns, and not all legends die. Some simply walk away.